Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that is shaking the whole world right now. You ever seen a man who is used to being the one making the calls, giving the orders, expecting everybody to just jump when he speaks, and then one day that call doesn't get answered? That's what just happened between the United States and India. A call went out, but it wasn't picked up. And when it wasn't picked up, the message sent across the world was louder than anything that could have been spoken over the phone. It was India saying, "We don't play that game anymore." And now, let me break this down for you. For decades, America's been used to playing the big boss. Whenever they wanted something, they made that call and expected the other nation to say, "Yes, sir," "No, sir," "Right away, sir." But this time, the script got flipped. Prime Minister Modi didn't just let the phone ring. He sent a signal that India is not going to be blackmailed, pressured, or pushed around anymore. That silence on the other end of the line was not weakness, it was strength. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. See, what America was expecting was fear. They thought India was going to run scared, fold under pressure, start shaking at the thought of sanctions, or losing access to trade. But what they didn't expect was this new India, a confident India, a self-reliant India. This is not the India of the past that needed approval. This is the India that's got its own game, its own voice, and its own destiny. And when America tried to throw its weight around, India stood there unmoved, unshaken, unfazed. That's when you know real power has shifted. This wasn't just about a missed call. This was about rejecting blackmail. You know what blackmail is? It's when somebody tries to use your fear against you, tries to control you with threats, tries to corner you into submission. But here's the thing. Blackmail only works on people who don't know their own strength. The moment you realize you don't need what that person's dangling over your head, the power flips. That's exactly what India just did. They looked at America's so-called threats and said, "Do what you gotta do, we'll still be standing." And that shook America to its core. You ever been in a situation where someone thought they had control over you? Maybe it was a boss, maybe it was a relationship, maybe it was some big company or government office. They thought you couldn't survive without them. But when you finally stood up and showed them that you could, that's when the whole balance of power changed. That's what India just did on the global stage. They showed America that they don't have to take orders anymore. They don't have to live in fear of sanctions. They don't have to bow down to blackmail. And let's be real for a second. America isn't used to hearing, no. They're used to countries lining up, begging for deals, begging for protection, begging for dollars. But India just flipped the script and said, "We're not begging, we're building." India's economy is growing faster than almost anyone else. India's military is stronger than it's ever been. India's diplomacy is respected worldwide. And India's people, over 1 billion strong, are standing behind their leaders saying, "We don't need to be pushed around anymore." That's the real shock. Now here's where it gets even deeper. This isn't just about one phone call. This is about a whole shift in how the world works. The old world order was simple. America at the top, everybody else falling in line. But that world is crumbling. India's rise is proof that multipolar power isn't just coming, it's already here. And America can't handle that. They're realizing they can't just threaten and intimidate anymore because the countries they used to control are now standing tall. And India is leading that charge. Think about it. Why did America even try to blackmail India? Because India refused to stop buying oil from Russia, refused to abandon its own interests, refused to become a puppet. They wanted India to cut ties, but India said, "We'll do what's best for our people, not what's convenient for you." And that's what rattled Washington. Because for the first time, they saw a nation big enough, bold enough, and strong enough to say no. When Modi refused that call, it wasn't personal, it was principle. It was about showing the world that India will not be bullied into decisions that harm its people. It was about sending a message to every other country watching. If we can say no, so can you. And let me tell you, that message is spreading like wildfire. Nations in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, they're looking at India and saying, if they can stand up to America, maybe we can too. And that's exactly why this moment is historic. America wanted to scare India into compliance, but instead they scared themselves. They woke up to the reality that India isn't dependent anymore. India has options. India has partners in Russia, in France, in the Middle East, in Africa. India is building alliances that don't revolve around Washington. And the more America tries to threaten, the more they push India closer to those other partners. That's the irony of blackmail. It backfires when the victim decides not to play the game. Now let's talk about courage for a second, because it takes real courage to reject blackmail. It's easy to give in, easy to take the deal, easy to stay quiet. But when you know you're standing on the side of what's right, when you know your people are behind you, when you know you've got strength in your corner, you find that courage. And Modi refusing that call was courage in action. That wasn't just politics. That was pride. That was principle. That was power. And make no mistake, this refusal is going to echo for years. Because once you show the world you won't be intimidated, that reputation sticks. Other countries now know India isn't going to bend under pressure. Investors, allies, rivals, they're all paying attention. And what they're seeing is a nation that answers only to its own people, not to some foreign power's threats. That's the foundation of true independence. You know, history is full of moments like this. Times when one act of defiance changed everything. When one refusal sparked a movement. This is one of those times. It's not just about America and India. It's about the future of global power. And the future is telling us loud and clear, no one nation can bully the rest anymore. Not when countries like India are standing tall. So let me tell you the real shock here. The shock isn't that America tried to blackmail India. We all knew they would. The shock is that India didn't flinch. India didn't compromise. India didn't answer that call. And the silence spoke louder than words. The silence said, we're not playing your game anymore. We've got our own game now. And that silence, my friends, is the sound of a new world being born. Because here's the truth. India rejecting blackmail isn't just about politics. It's about dignity. It's about sovereignty. It's about showing the world that respect is earned, not demanded. And when India refused to be treated like a junior partner, it forced America to realize that the days of unquestioned dominance are over. The world is changing and India is leading that change. And let me tell you, this is just the beginning. You're going to see more of this. More countries refusing calls, more countries rejecting pressure, more countries saying no to blackmail. Because once one nation shows it can be done, it inspires others. And right now, India has lit that spark. So don't look at this as just a missed phone call. Look at it as a turning point. A moment when India proved it could stand tall against the biggest power in the world. A moment when blackmail lost its grip. A moment when silence became the loudest roar. And a moment when the world realized India is not to be pushed around anymore. Because at the end of the day, the shock isn't that America tried to control India. The shock is that India said no, and the world is standing up, watching, learning, and following. The real shock wasn't the threat. It was that India didn't even blink. You see, when somebody with power throws a threat at you, they expect a reaction. They expect panic, fear, Some kind of flinch that proves they still hold control over you. That's the way America has played this game for decades. They built their power not just on bombs, dollars, or armies, but on the fear they could spread with just a few words. A threat from Washington used to be enough to send leaders scrambling, economies trembling, nations bending. But this time, when that threat was directed at India, something different happened. Nothing moved. Not the government, not the markets, not the people. India stood firm, looked the storm in the face, and didn't even blink. Now that kind of composure doesn't come overnight. It comes from years of building confidence, years of strengthening your foundations, years of proving to yourself that you can stand without a crutch. India has been on that journey. Once seen as a country that needed approval from the West, that relied on foreign powers for validation, India has transformed into a nation that carries its own weight and shapes its own destiny. That's why when America tried to flex its muscles, India didn't shake. The world saw something they weren't used to seeing, a nation standing tall against the so-called most powerful country on earth. And let's be real, America isn't used to people ignoring its threats. When they say jump, they expect the world to ask, how high? But India isn't jumping anymore. India is walking its own path, setting its own pace, and refusing to let someone else's fear dictate its choices. That's why this moment is bigger than politics, bigger than diplomacy. It's about power shifting before our very eyes. Because power isn't just about who's got the bigger army or the fatter bank account. Power is about who controls the narrative, who commands respect, and who refuses to bow under pressure. And in that moment of silence, when India refused to react, the world saw that power shifting. Think about it like this. When you're in a fight, the most dangerous opponent isn't the one who's screaming, threatening, making noise. The most dangerous opponent is the one who looks you dead in the eye and doesn't even flinch. That's when you know you're dealing with somebody who can't be intimidated. India was that opponent in this showdown. America tried to rattle it, tried to force its hand, but instead of panic, all they got was poise. And that poise sent chills around the globe because it told every nation watching that America's threats no longer carry the weight they used to. Now let's talk about why India didn't blink. First, because India knows its worth. For decades, India has been building its economy, developing its industries, investing in technology, and strengthening its military. Today, it's not the same country it was 30 years ago. It's the fifth largest economy in the world, a nuclear power, a spacefaring nation, and a diplomatic heavyweight. India doesn't need to bow because it has earned its place at the table. When you know your value, you don't jump at every shadow. That's lesson number one. Second, India has options. America used to be the only game in town. If they cut you off, you were isolated, finished. But today, India has partnerships across the globe. Russia, France, Japan, the Middle East, Africa, all are ready to engage with India. So when Washington says, do this or else, India can calmly reply, or else what? We have choices. That kind of leverage is priceless. It turns threats into empty noise. Third, and maybe most important, India's strength comes from within. 1 billion plus people standing behind their country gives it a foundation no foreign threat can shake. The Indian public isn't swayed by fear of what America might do. They believe in their own resilience. They've seen their country rise from poverty, survive crisis, and still come out stronger. So when America tried to stir fear, Indians just shrugged and said, we've been through worse. We'll be fine. That's why Modi and his government can stand firm. They know their people aren't afraid. And this unshakable calm, this refusal to blink, is exactly what terrifies America. Because threats only work when the other side believes you still hold power over them. When they realize you don't, The entire strategy collapses. That's what happened here. America played the old playbook, but India had already outgrown it. By not blinking, India proved that the emperor has no clothes, that the threats are just words without bite, and that revelation is shaking the entire international system. You could feel it ripple across the globe. Leaders in smaller countries, long bullied by superpowers, watched this moment closely. They saw India standing strong and thought to themselves, if they can do it, maybe we can too. Because courage is contagious. Defiance is contagious. And once one nation shows that blackmail doesn't work, the whole game starts to change. That's why this wasn't just India's moment. It was a moment for the whole global South, for every country tired of being told what to do. But let me break down another angle. America underestimated India's patience. They thought a threat would provoke a reaction, some sign of desperation. But India's leadership played it cool, calm, collected. That patience, that ability to wait out the storm, is deadly in geopolitics because it shows you don't fear the short-term pain. You're willing to ride it out for the long-term gain. That's a level of discipline most countries can't match. And it's exactly why America's threats fell flat. India showed that time is on its side. This refusal to blink also signals something deeper. Confidence in destiny. India isn't just reacting to events anymore. It's shaping them. It's not just surviving in the world order. It's rewriting it. And when a nation moves with that kind of purpose, it becomes unstoppable. That's why this moment is so powerful. Because it showed the world that India believes in its own future so strongly that no external pressure can derail it. Imagine being in Washington and realizing that your threats don't land anymore. Imagine realizing that the phone calls you used to make, the pressure you used to apply, no longer command fear. That's the nightmare America is waking up to. And India is the one that delivered it. By standing tall, by refusing to blink, India exposed the limits of American power in a way that no speech or protest could. It was a simple act of defiance, but its impact will echo for decades. And it's not just about politics, it's psychological. America thrives on control, on the idea that they can bend nations with fear. But when India didn't blink, it broke that illusion. It told the world, you don't have to be afraid anymore. That's bigger than sanctions, bigger than trade, bigger than military drills. That's a change in mindset. And once that mindset changes, the entire balance of power changes with it. The real shock then wasn't that America tried to threaten. That was predictable. The shock was that India met that threat with a stillness so powerful it turned the tables. Because in that silence, in that refusal to react, the world saw a giant rise. They saw a nation that no longer takes orders, no longer plays by someone else's rules, no longer fears being cut off. They saw India as a leader, not a follower. They saw a future where no single power dominates. They saw freedom. And that's why when you look back at this moment years from now, it won't be remembered as just a clash between two leaders. It'll be remembered as the day threats lost their power, the day blackmail stopped working, the day a nation proved that courage beats fear every time. The real shock wasn't the threat. It was that India didn't even blink.